The developing stories this hour on the Weather Network include weather not helping the chemical fire in Vancouver. We have had some power outages in Ontario, and salt was a contributor to that. A silver lining for temperatures in the long range as we see the temperatures warming. So that's some good news. We have this elongated front that extends from Labrador all the way down into Texas. And along that front, some winter weather as far down as I've seen through Kentucky, Tennessee, seeing some snowfall. And then this low pressure system moving across Western Canada may bring Edmonton some rain-snow mix through the overnight. It would be brief, and we're not looking at much from that, but it is something worth noting if you're in the capital region of Alberta. And then we have extreme cold warnings in place through the Saguenay River region and north up into Chibougamau and Chicoutimi. But those are the areas that are seeing the most of the cold, with the exception of the far north of Canada, where we have extreme cold warnings over the north of minus 50 to minus 55 wind chills in some areas like Nunavut and further north. So let's take a look at our special air quality statement in place. North Coast inland areas and through the Bulkley Valley, we do have air quality issues through these regions. So the air is very stable, of course, in British Columbia, as we have high pressure dominating for the most part. This afternoon, temperatures sitting in, well, double-digit territory in southwestern BC, looking great. Calgary sitting at 7 with sun and cloud, and warmer now today, of course, than what we've seen the last little while. Let's take a look at our first must-see video. This is from Vancouver. The cause of the fire is unknown, but the problem is that the air is so stable that it wasn't able to get rid of the fumes from the chemical fire, maybe as well as it could have had there been a bit of a breeze. When we look at the risk of freezing rain now to the prairies, we've got this in place around Edmonton. Again, I mentioned how it may be some rain-snow mix. Again, a very late line of freezing rain possible later tonight and overnight. Wednesday's highs, 2 degrees in Calgary versus minus 21 in Regina. Look at today, minus 4 in Regina. So a big warm-up is happening actually across southern Saskatchewan. Now Manitoba, it's going to take another day or so to get some warmer temperatures in for you. Southern Ontario, we've got a couple of cold days ahead of us. This afternoon, wind chills will be in about the minus mid-teens. Same for southern Quebec and across Atlantic Canada. We do have wind chills registering here. Halifax at minus 6, but colder still in Montreal, or rather in Moncton and Montreal for that matter. St. John's at minus 5 as we head into Saturday. So it shows us here that we have this moderation that begins to build in across some portions of the east. Certainly Manitoba and northwestern Ontario will be feeling that as well. So let's take a look actually at some more active weather across the west in just a few minutes. Stay with us. But it doesn't help when you have high pressure and you have stable atmosphere and no wind to carry off all of those fumes. But that was the case yesterday in Vancouver. Special air quality statement is in place for the north coast inland areas as well as through the Bulkley Valley in the north of BC. And that's exactly where we're going to see some precipitation. Not expecting anything in southwest BC or in BC South at all with regard to precipitation, save for maybe some scattered showers as you go north of Quesnel and Williams Lake. And then there will be a low pressure system that crosses here across the prairies, and that will bring in possibly to Edmonton and maybe even down portions of Saskatchewan some freezing rain. So the rainfall forecast through Friday, again, highest totals here up toward the north coast regions. Let's go to Banff and our must-see video of our camera operator, Sean Legg, and really great conditions persist across the west with regard to temperatures in Alberta. While Calgary's at 2 degrees versus yesterday it was minus 20s in Regina. Today we're going to go to minus 4. So that's the impact of that surge of warmer air that's building in across the west. So high pressure is the case. We don't really see much for weather, save for, again, that low pressure system to the north may bring just a little bit of freezing rain and maybe some rain, snow showers, very brief and very isolated for the most part. In Toronto this afternoon, minus 9 with mostly sunny conditions and a little bit of cloud cover, not much in the way of wind, colder temperatures today and tomorrow, and then we'll start to see a trend toward warmer weather. The streak has broken in Ottawa and Montreal. We made it through 43 days in Montreal of not reaching above zero, and in Ottawa, 39 days. Of course, Toronto, the streak has ended as well. So maybe this is a sign of things to come, right? As the temperatures warm, when we look ahead for the next few days, Ottawa going from minus 8 to 0, Montreal up to minus 1 for Sunday. So some improvements are had. Let's take a look at, because there's so much snow in the forest, they're being forced out toward the beach. And that's been a problem because they're getting caught in these crevices. And obviously that ice rescue happened just yesterday as a result of all of the snow that's on the ground. The forecast temperatures now for Western Canada, we see that warmth building into Saskatchewan, as we mentioned. And then we look actually at the temperatures warming up here across even the Great Lakes, looking pretty good as well. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Weather Network. I'm Sheryl Plouffe with your developing stories. Weather not helping that chemical fire in Vancouver, the salt contributing to power outages in the GTA, and a silver lining for temperatures in the Long Range as we see warming coming toward the east, which it's been a long time coming, right? We have this very elongated front that extends really from Atlantic Canada all the way down into Texas. And with that, there is some winter weather down into Kentucky and Tennessee. And then back in the west, a developing low to the north will bring some precipitation. Let's take a look actually at the west. Chemical smell or the fumes away from the area, so it kind of just sat there, and there was a shelter in place for most at the time of that fire, which is still under investigation. When we look actually at the warming temperatures and precipitation, we see the warmth building now more into the eastern prairies where it has been so cold. But this low pressure system may bring a little bit of freezing rain and maybe some snow rain showers to places like Edmonton and Saskatoon through the overnight. But largely it's a pretty calm pattern in the west. Not expecting anything in Vancouver, Victoria, but it's up in the north coast areas that we see the rainfall. So back to our satellite and radar as we focus on the prairies. It is still cold enough in Weyburn, Saskatchewan yesterday to that. But temperature's so cold. But we will see some improvements, though, beginning today in Saskatchewan. It may take another day or so to reach into Manitoba, but some warmth is on the way, or warmer temperatures. It's all relative, right? But it's high pressure for the most part. Again, a little bit of flurry activity in Regina and Winnipeg before things start to taper off. Back to satellite and radar and southern Ontario, northern Ontario. We have seen some snow as of late. Let's go up to North Bay and check in on conditions there. Some weather, of course, coming through southern Ontario caused some power outages there just a day or so ago. And now by Friday, maybe a little bit more in the way of flurries coming through with our low pressure system, but again, very light in nature. Satellite and radar, again, we show that boundary that extends all the way into Atlantic Canada. So let's take a look at Newfoundland and what we have going on really across the eastern portions of the country is the winds are calming down. The next low pressure system largely staying offshore, but there could be some flurries passing by Halifax. Some evacuations took place in Vancouver yesterday as well under very stable conditions weather-wise. High pressure, not much in the way of wind. And then up into the north coast areas and inland, we have special air quality statements posted for British Columbia. I'm Sheryl Plouffe, by the way. Thank you so much for being here for an update on your weather. And let's see what's happening across the west, because we have that precipitation here for the north coast, but not so in Vancouver and Victoria. Still looking at some dry weather and temperatures even climbing the next couple of days, like 13 degrees, looking really good. The temperatures also moderating in Manitoba and Saskatchewan in advance of this cold front, but we do have this low, and that could bring some flurry activity. Now looking at a lot of snowfall with it, but also in Edmonton, it's possible that it could be some rain and snow mixed through the overnight, and also maybe even some freezing rain in that line too. Through Friday, a little bit of rain there for the north coast, snowboarding there. So thanks so much, Sean, for doing that for us, because we want to live vicariously through you. And we're able to do that when you show us these great shots. Well, up in the mountains, we've got some colder temperatures clearly at elevation, but look at Calgary at 2 degrees. And then yesterday, minus 21 in Regina, today minus 4. So that goes to show you how that milder air is building in nicely across southern Saskatchewan and then more so Manitoba as we head into tomorrow. Let's take a look actually how far it would slide on that ice-covered snow in Ontario. It gives a beautiful glisten, actually. It's really nice. Consecutive days below zero. Well, we've broken the streak now for these three major centers because we had the temperature rise to not very much above freezing, but enough to break the actual streak we've been on for, a month and a half of not reaching above zero. I'm Sheryl Plouffe. Glad you were here for a weather update. Let's get you caught up with where the wind chills are the most extreme across the country. And it's still really the eastern prairies that are seeing most of the cold. However, it has become colder in Ontario and Quebec. So these are the wind chills as we see here in blue and black. Minus 21 is what it feels like in the nation's capital. And then back even toward Calgary with a wind chill of minus 11. The cold air is in place across the east for another couple of days, but in the west we actually have some really decent conditions for BC especially, and some warming on the way for the eastern prairies, which have been so cold. We have a low pressure system bringing a little bit of precipitation up toward Edmonton later tonight, maybe even some rain and snow mixing, but in Banff we've had some great conditions. This is our, we have actually seen high pressure across the west, and that's been the case with temperature contrast that's been pretty amazing between Saskatchewan and Alberta, where today's forecast highs bring us to 7 in Calgary, and then we've moderated really significantly in Regina this afternoon at -4 versus yesterday being at -20. Now, consecutive days below zero. We went for a long stretch, didn't we, in Toronto at 37 days, but now the streak has broken in both Ottawa and for Montreal too. Let's take a look at Grimsby, Ontario. Obviously, people out there just throwing the ball to see how far will it actually go. It goes quite a distance, actually. 7-day forecast in Toronto. We have temperatures moderating, so this is bringing us back up into probably where most people want to be after the kind of winter we've seen. A record cold February brings us into the early part of March with a slightly more moderate temperature range and above freezing values. So some positivity, I think, in terms of those temperatures if you want to see it a little bit warmer in Toronto, in Montreal, and even for Ottawa, or here's Montreal, but looking at temperatures going up to 4 degrees by next Wednesday. So certainly some improvements there. Of course, we've got developing stories coming up for you and lots more active weather coverage to come. So please stay with us on the Weather Network. Thank you so much, Rachel. Thousands upon thousands of people go to that maple syrup festival, by the way. It's a very popular thing. I love maple syrup. And next week, we're going to have maple syrup weather, frankly, in southern Ontario. So we'll get into these developing stories. Let's take a look at what's been happening out in British Columbia. And with the mild temperatures, it has been resulting in temperatures sitting, in some cases, double digits. Western Canada. It's improving across the prairies, but still cold in the Great Lakes, as Rachel was alluding to with her frozen hair, and then blustery conditions still in some parts of the Atlantic provinces, although it's better, it's not quite as windy as yesterday. When we look at our forecast for this afternoon, 12 in Abbotsford, 10 in Nanaimo, looking great. 7 in Calgary now, some improvements. And then even in Saskatchewan, where yesterday it was in the -20s, today will be in the minus single digits. So a big improvement had for southern Saskatchewan, like in Weyburn, for example. Despite that little bit of freezing rain that's possible, largely this is a warming trend. 2 degrees in Calgary from yesterday, -21, and then here's the contrast for today. So much more respectable in my view. And then in southern Manitoba, we have still some cold temperatures here, but we're definitely going to be improving that over the next couple of days for you. So let's take a look actually at, wanted to promote this story because this is online. This is about these salmon that are freezing to death in Nova Scotia, down in the southwest. And actually, if you want to read the full story on it, Sheryl has written this on our website at theweathernetwork.com. But yeah, it's being blamed, the cold is being blamed for killing off some of the salmon. That's pretty cold. Let's take a look at our must-see video. Weather-wise, we had very stable conditions yesterday with high pressure in BC as well as most of Western Canada. And then now looking ahead to the rainfall, it'll be more in the north and central coast areas that see the rain. Vancouver and Victoria, you'll see that in your locals. No rain expected for you. Low pressure system is moving across the central and northern portions of the prairies. That is keeping it warmer across the south, but it also does bring the potential of some freezing rain along that warm front as it moves through. Again, very brief and isolated, and then rainfall here for the north coast of BC and Sunshine Coast. Sunshine Coast, not so much. Central Coast areas getting the rainfall. Let's go to our must-see video as we'll live vicariously through Sean, right? Temperatures are obviously cold at elevation, but in Calgary, 2 degrees. -21 yesterday. This was yesterday. Today, 7 degrees in Calgary versus -4. So we're starting to see that warmth building in across southern Saskatchewan, but Manitoba will take about another day or so to moderate the temperatures. Now, we see high pressure, except for that low, maybe a little bit of flurry activity through Regina and Winnipeg. Again, the temperatures are warming, but it's still cold enough to support some light flurry activity or some snowfall. And then the streak of consecutive days below freezing, or below freezer, not rising above zero, I should say, has ended for Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto. Let's turn it over to Rachel Schutzen with an update on the maple syrup situation in Kitchener-Waterloo. All right, thanks very much, Rachel. Another great story that you can read about online. A woman in Ottawa is knitting a sweater, or rather a blanket. And what she's doing is, depending on the weather conditions, she's choosing specific yarns to correspond with that actual weather. So you can read about this. She's got it all color-coded here, and it's really interesting. It's going to be really fascinating to see how this all shapes up by the end of the year if she continues on that trend. But yeah, a really great idea to record the weather of the year. A look ahead for select cities. Montreal going up to -1 by the time we get to Sunday. Halifax going to freezing, and we've got some improvements on the way for southern Ontario as well. A warming trend, great for maple syrup by next week.